Hello, City Skylines fans. I'm Sockswayup, and welcome back to another episode of Newman Shore. Last episode, we worked on a little bit of a water treatment plant, as well as the new necessity of the disaster recovery unit. This episode, we're going to be expanding. A lot of expansion. First, we're going to have to clean up this existing area, move the recycling centers. I have some plans to make this a high-density area. This is going to be the new skyline, at least of this side of the river. With the airport taking up so much land that we did there, we're going to have a little bit of a challenge to get to 36,000 population is what we need to unlock the next tile. So we got a ways to go. We got over 16,000 to add to the city. That's almost twice what we have now. Not that much space to grow in. So we're going to do some expanding. We're going to also fix some roads that I didn't like originally. So we're going to line those back up and make them straight. That angle, it wasn't working for me. I think it was a good idea to begin with, but it really wasn't working out. So we're going to start by laying down some roads, a new road layout on this part of the town to allow us to zone a lot and let the game run some cycles. This process of expanding as quickly as I'm trying to do to keep this series moving along, it's going to take a lot of game cycles, a lot of demands going to go up and down and fluctuate. And so we're going to try to prep as much area, as much as we can to get all that going, and then probably detail while we wait for the game to catch up to the ridiculous amount of zoning we're about to do. And then next in preparation, I wanted to get the train out of here. I don't want to do the same thing we did on the other side and actually have an idea of what I want to do with the railroad track on the other side of the river. We'll get to that later on, but here we're gonna, the business, it's not a business. The city's gonna spend a little bit of money. We're gonna move the train track underground, at least for a little stretch here, so that doesn't take away from the skyline on this side. Kind of learned from what I did on the other side, and I probably would not bring these lines at all near this highway. I think I would probably leave it more in the middle of the road, and that's something that's going to be a challenge of mine moving forward, or to challenge myself, is to study some real life railroads and other mass transit solutions so I can be better at that in City Skylines. Now that we got a good amount of the road laid out here, we're gonna start zoning. And one of the things you can see in this area is we're doing like a tighter, smaller grid. I like to do that in high density areas. I think it helps with the look of things. You have these roads that are really tight. And if you look at downtown areas, you will notice this. A lot of this is kind of what I took away when I visited New York, is there's a lot of roads, there's a lot of blocks, there's a lot of intersections. There's a lot of traffic in these high density areas, and that's okay. That's realistic. So we're gonna do a mixture of high density commercial and low density commercial, as well as adding some office complexes as well in this area. Gonna be a multi-purpose area for all your needs in the city, except for industry. We're not gonna have that in here, but definitely commercial, work. You can live close to where you work, maybe walk to work and not have to commute because of the options in this area. It's gonna make for a cool skyline at the end of this build. And here we're gonna add some bike paths. And this was my way of separating or redoing the zoning here so we could get a 4x4 build of an office complex on the edge of this grid. And then eventually we'll also get it on the other side as well, or the zoning on the other side of this road as well, closer to the highway. But I thought it'd be cool to bring in these bike paths and give some opportunity for people to get around a little bit quicker so they'll be able to ride their bikes and not be on the road, since these are skinny roads here. So it's a little multi-purpose. It's helping us with the zoning as well as giving people options to get to and from work. now that the zoning's coming in and the demand is still there, and I'm noticing the citizens, the population isn't increasing much. So again, a lot of cycles of the game, but also we need to expand more. There's a ways to go. We're still 16,000 away from where we want to get. We're not going to get there this episode, but it definitely showed me that I needed to push the envelope a little bit and keep expanding and add a lot more into this area. There's another area on the other side of the river farther back that we're going to add some residential later on that might help us get to 36,000. It's going to be tough. We might have to do some tricks and populate an area that we don't want to just to get to the milestone. We'll see. I'm going to try not to go that route with it, but you can see here we're almost to one of the milestones, which is 22,000. Unfortunately, that doesn't unlock a tile for us, so we're going to have to keep pushing forward with this population, but also, you know, try to keep the city design in mind and not just do things to open up the new tile. I think that's some of the things I've learned early on playing Cities Skylines is I used to just rush the milestones, and it made for terrible traffic, it made for ugly cities, it made for hacks and things that cause you to stop playing the game. But that was a little bit of a rant. We're just gonna keep zoning this area. We'll mix in a little bit more residential later on, but I wanted to make sure that our demand stayed even in this area or in the whole city as we add a lot of people. We want to make sure they have places to shop, places to work, make sure we don't get things out of balance and have to focus on a huge commercial area or a huge industrial area just to balance things back out, trying to keep that balance in mind as we go. And this is where we're talking about the balance. I'm adding in a lot of commercial, a lot of office to get ahead of it. There's another area we are going to kind of work on that's really going to mess with the game. Sometimes when you delete an area that's a certain type of zoning, for it to rebuild, it has to go through a lot of days, a lot of weeks in Cities Skylines for it to catch up. So I'm trying to get ahead of that, as I mentioned in the last segment, is we want to make sure that this balance is taken care of. And I've had cities where there's not enough workers and it's just a nightmare to catch up to. And so far we've avoided that in Newman Shore. So we're going to keep that going. This area is close to where we're going to leave it. A lot of upgrades, a lot of just letting people get educated, and then adding some education will help that as well. So this area we talked about a couple episodes ago, how I wasn't happy with the way this neighborhood turned out. So I wanted to add a couple more roads in here to have it a little more dense for this residential area, and there's a couple too many open spaces in the middle of the neighborhood. And then I also decided to zone it the same way we did with everything else. Once we get done with this area, it's gonna look like one huge community, one huge development, and that was the plan here. So going into the policies, we're gonna set this one as self-efficient homes as well as the rest of the area. It looks really uniform when it's done, and I think it was a great decision to do that. It just stuck out like a sore thumb over here with these vanilla houses and some of the custom builds that we're doing. And so while we're waiting for some of the game cycles to really catch up with the ridiculous amount of things that we've added to it to zone, we did some detailing. Nothing better to do than detailing while you're waiting for the game to catch up to the huge changes you just made. So we were starting to notice that we were getting the little icon for not enough well-educated customers. It made me look into the education tab. We fell way behind on elementary school. High school wasn't too far off, but we needed some elementary schools, so we added a couple of these here. This is gonna be a full little corridor of high-density buildings. It's gonna quickly eat at that capacity that we just added for elementary schools, so we'll have to keep that in mind, especially when you do these high density areas that have a lot of high density housing. You're gonna have to keep up with the educational demand and make sure you add some schools into that area. And We kind of spaced that a little bit at the beginning of this, but we caught it before we got too far into zoning, and I think it works out okay. But again, a lot of cycles of the game need to go. A lot of upgrades to all these buildings. We'll probably add some parks, add some services to make sure that all of the needs of the people are satisfied, so the buildings can keep upgrading and increase the population. Make sure that these houses are at full capacity and always have as many households as possible living in them by keeping the area pretty, keeping the land value up, or increasing the land value. And so those are some of the things that we're gonna probably do off camera, and then give you an update on how it turned out. It's not a lot going on in this episode, but it's a necessity that we had to do to expand to get to the next tile, to then move forward with some of the plans that we have long term for Newman Shore. So wrapping up today, I kind of wanted to show what everything looked like after the game ran for probably an hour. I, did a little bit of detailing, a little bit of paying attention to the land value and increasing that in areas. And you can see here what I was talking about earlier, how this looks uniform. It looks like this was a development that was made by the same people, and it all blends together with a little bit of the apartment complex idea of the high density there in the middle, and a little bit of commercial as well. I think these neighborhoods blend together perfectly. Just got to fix some of that train situation. But here you go. There's the new downtown area. There's a nice blend from high density. We're gonna lead back into low density. The skyline's looking pretty cool. We actually have one on this side of town, and it doesn't take away from some of the original buildings that we did. And then on the other side, we also have a competing city now. We kind of have two separate cities on each side of the river. Pretty cool. I can't wait to get to the coast in this city as well, not just work on this river. I'm Sockswayup. Thanks for hanging out. I'll catch you on the next episode of Newman Shore.